Welcome to the latest CIPR Sports Network webinar. We're delighted today to have Paul McCarthy with us, a revered journalist in his day, the editor of the News of the World, sports editor of the News of the World, and now a sports communications consultant. Thanks very much for joining us today, Paul.
No, delighted to be here. Great to see old friends again.
First of all, if for those who will be watching who don't know everything about you, maybe you could give us a little potted history of your journalistic and communications background.
Yeah, started out in journalism when I was 17 years old. Didn't go to university. Wasn't very much in the way of university training for journalists back then. Not like now, where there's fantastic specialised university degree and courses. Um, Worked my way up through local papers. Went to cover Wimbledon at Plough Lane in 1988 for a paper called the South London Press, who at the time, it was incredible, really. It was just a fantastic area and patch to cover. I covered Wimbledon, but we also covered Millwall, Palace, and Charlton. And at the time, there were four clubs in the top flight. Difficult to believe now, obviously, with Charlton, Millwall, although Millwall looked like they could come back this season, but obviously Wimbledon and the whole split with Milton Keynes. Um, had a great time there, 4 years. Thankfully built myself a good reputation. Moved to the News of the World as a football reporter. Became chief football reporter there. Moved on to the Sunday People to be chief um, sports columnist at the People for 7 years, and then joined the News of the World. Came off the road as it was, um, and then became sports editor at the News of the World. Was the last sports editor of the News of the World. My only vestige of my time at the News of the World is in the background. That sport that was on the last day, that was hanging over the sport section, and I cut it down and kept it as a keepsake. Strange times, 2011, July 2011. Um, but during my time as a sports editor at the News of the World, I kind of helped keep friends out of the News of the World. A lot of people had come to me, contacts, and said, "How do I stay out of the News of the World?" And I would give them sort of unofficial advice. So I thought, well, probably the sports editor of the News of the World is the best job I'm ever going to have in journalism. I could have stayed on at News International as it was, News UK as it is now. But there would have been no guarantees as to getting back to that level of job. So I decided to take the leap. Thankfully, I'd negotiated a really good contract at the News of the World. I walked away with about 18 months' money when it closed, which gave me a nice safety net. And just started working. People came to me and said, "Listen, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to start up my own consultancy." Started out with a couple of clients, and just built from there. Worked with lots of football clubs, worked with the Football Association, sponsors, individuals. Yeah, so I've been doing that for 15 years.
And looking afar now at the world of journalism, it's clearly changed so much
Yeah.
from the days when you and I would be writing for the Nationals or editing. What challenges do you think that provides for sports organisations now, and how can they best address them? Obviously, they're focusing a lot on their owned content, but having that third party endorsement from the mainstream media, as it were, is still important, but it becomes far more
Yeah, it,
challenging,
it
doesn't it?
is. It is. It's still vital. I think in this world of influencers, who I have a great deal of admiration for. I know a couple of guys who are working so ferociously hard at building their own brands, if you like, and do it fantastically well and successfully. I've got a great deal of time for them, and I understand why football clubs will go to them rather than the traditional mainstream media. But the endorsement of mainstream media is still huge. Um, if I'm advising football clubs, I always say, well, you've got to strike a balance. Um, it's great having influencers who've got eyeballs on social media, whatever channels it is, differently packaged, obviously. But I have to say, if you just for argument's sake, if you've got 1,000 word positive feature in Mail Online, what's it, the second biggest newspaper website in the world? You are getting millions and millions of eyeballs from via mail online. So you would be a fool to completely ignore the mainstream media. And the smart media organizations are working digitally ahead of print every single step of the way. Print is very much a secondary, in fact, almost a minor consideration these days. So if you've got that groundswell of eyeballs via the mainstream media websites and their social media channels, you would be a fool to completely and utterly disregard them.
So you, working with your clients, you think in a very integrated way about digital, social, traditional
Yeah.
broadcast, and it's actually about the story rather and then the channel.
But I've always said, people said, "Oh, what's the differences between journalism, sports, football journalism, which is what I centered on, and PR?" I said it's they are the different faces of the same coin. Um, Media, if for a journalist, Anna, it's about identification of the message, i.e., the story. It's about the efficiency of transmission of that story. It's about finding the right channel for that story. That's exactly the same as PR. The best people in PR know what the line is straight away. They know their best method of transmission. They know the strengths and the weaknesses of the various media outlets, channels, social media channels, and they work that way. So I think that it's a kind of a hackneyed phrase, isn't it? Transferable skills, but it's I found that to be absolutely the case. I found it to be it's knowing what the story is, knowing how to condense it into its absolute purest form, and then transmitting it as quickly, not always as quickly, but certainly as efficiently and as widespread as you can.
It's been maybe at times a well-trodden path from journalism to comms,
Mm.
but not always successful. What is it you think that makes that difference of someone who
I,
takes that step
I,
into
I
it?
think when you're a journalist, you uh, you're sent to a you're sent around the world. If you're very fortunate, you're sent to the best matches, or you're sent to cover events, and you know that what your requirements are. You deliver on those requirements, and you see the story, the report, the feature, the interview appear on whatever channel via whatever media organization it is. And you tick that box and you move on. And if you get to a certain level, you're heralded, you win awards. I think PR, certainly from my perspective, working as a sort of as a consultant, um, the what you think is your best work, what you think is your best advice, doesn't always see the light of day.
Yeah.
So you have to subsume your ego a little bit. You have to go, okay, um, I'm being paid to deliver expertise and opinion. If people choose to ignore that particular expertise or opinion, that's not necessarily on you, that's on them, because they're paying you for a certain level of information, as I say, expertise, insight, wisdom, if you like, advice. They don't, there's absolutely nothing that says they have to take that advice. And sometimes the advice you give, you in retrospect, you go, yeah, I'm glad they didn't take that advice, because that possibly wasn't the best path. Few and far between, hopefully, if you want to be successful. But the bottom line is, I think journalism is very much, you're driven by the daily, by the monthly, by the every 2 years there's a tournament in certainly in football. If it's Tuesday, you're Anfield. If it's Wednesday, you're at Old Trafford. If it's Saturday, you're at the Emirates or the Etihad or something like that. And you can plot. And I think people get used to that. And I think sometimes it's very difficult. And I've known people who've come out of journalism and gone into PR thinking, well, I know this, I know what the story is, I know what the line is. And the frustration is when they go, well, they didn't listen to what I said. And oh my God, I can't work with people who won't listen to it. That's ridiculous. You're paid to give advice, you're paid to give expertise and insight. There's absolutely nothing which says that they have to take that, and you have to accept that. And you have to go, you have to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and go, well, I did my very best. I gave them what I thought good looks like. And that's all there is to it.
We'll come on to crisis communications in a little while, but for a lot of clients, they employ communications consultants to help promote the good work that they're doing and the
Yeah.
good news stories. Given the tendency for journalism, particularly as we've gone into an increasingly clickbait era where controversy, drama, and negativity become even more prevalent.
Mm.
What advice would you give to consultants who want to try and get those soft, good news stories in that may not have the hard cutting edges that are going to attract the journalists that the clients are looking to secure?
I think now that you have to think strategically that sometimes it probably goes against what I've said just a minute ago, but sometimes you have to go, okay, well, how can we promote this within our own channels? How can we get this out, and how can we get cut through on our own channels, because we are our own media.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think that's when, with this demand, I think what you have to accept, and I think what good consultants, I guess, should know is the broadest scope of outlets out there, and you have to be quite nimble. You have to realize that, okay, this may not have the most eyeballs on it initially, but there's got a longevity to it, and it's not going to be taken over by the crash bang wallop of the daily agenda. So you look at a channel which is, we're talking about webinars and we're talking about podcasts. I think sometimes they are a fantastic opportunity because they have longevity. They are always there. And there are so many podcast outlets or whatever. There are, it's just everybody's got one. Or so it seems. And I think sometimes there is a demand there. Well, sorry, there's always a demand there for a podcast because they have to fill it on is it a daily basis or a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis? I don't know, whatever it is, but they need to fill, and they'll give you time, and they'll give you, they're not looking for confrontation. They're looking for a conversation. They're looking for a long form. It's almost like the replication of the long form Saturday, what we used to call the Saturday interview or the Sunday interview in newspapers. It's 1,000, 1,500 words where you get time, and it's not a crash bang wallop, last night blasted. It's a considered piece. Podcasts, good podcasts, and there are dozens and hundreds of very, very, very good podcasts, are always looking for content. They need content. Sometimes think smart, think like that. Sit them down and say, okay, we've got a message to sell. There's lots of other stuff around it, but as long as we get a focus, even if it's just a couple of minutes out of an hour, then you've pretty much succeeded. My son works for one of the major podcast companies, and I was listening to a couple of ones that he produces this week, and I can see the work that he does. He's a senior producer. I can see the work that he does, and it's he's been there he's gone out and interviewed these people, and it's literally only made 30 seconds on the podcast, but then there's been subtle references to it by the presenters, the hosts, and you go, do you know what? I can see why this company had come to this podcast, because it's not oh, here it is, it's an hour about this, but it was like a 15-second clip, and then there were subtle references to the brand all the way through the podcast. And it was smart, and it was clever, and it was strategic. And I thought, yeah, and it made me think, okay, yeah, I've got to, there are outlets out there which are not obvious, which are not mainstream, which are not going to be all singing, all dancing. Look at us, look at this. This is what we're doing. But there's just subtle, clever references to it, and it's very effective.
How do you, with the sort of explosion of potential places and so many influencers and podcasts and everything, how do you um, find those opportunities, build those relationships, maintain them? It's much harder now. There are many more places.
Chris. It comes back down to the very, very basic tenets of journalism, which is your contacts. You live and die on your contacts. You live and die as a journalist on somebody giving you a call, or now sending you a WhatsApp, or whatever, saying, God, you'll never guess what. And you go out, and your best contacts, I always found, and Chris, we've known each other, David, we've known each other for a million years. Your
Hmm.
best contacts never give you the biggest story, but your best contacts always phone you if they hear something that's happening. And it may not be about, there were like agents, players, managers, coaches, backroom staff, who I worked with for years and years and years, as a journalist. Never really gave me a great story, but if there was a story out there, I could bounce it off them and go, do you know what? I've heard this. Have you heard? Oh yeah, I did hear that. It's this, and it just puts a little bit of flesh on the bones. They're not giving you a story, but it's the build up of contacts, and it's the trust. That's what it comes down to. You build up a level of trust that you'll never let people down. Um, and it's exactly the same now. It's those journalists, those influencers that you've built relationships as a PR consultant, media, whatever, strategist, and you go, okay, I can trust them to get that story out. There are some who are bigger, they're better, possibly in the eyes of, well, I've got X amount of million subscribers, followers on all these various channels. Yeah, that's great, but I don't know you, I don't trust you. Until I've built up a level of trust, why would I go to you? Um, it's a very small village. Football, football journalism, football media. It's a very, very small village, and you very quickly work out who you can trust, who has the degree of integrity that your client requires, and you tend to go back to them time and time again until you've built new relationships in new areas, and then you go, okay, well, I can diversify a little bit now. I can push the messaging via these channels, because actually we've met, we've had a coffee, we've been out for a bite to eat, we've spoken. I like the cut of the jib. They seem very trustworthy. Integrity is massive. Authenticity is massive. And once you break down those barriers, and you see behind the velvet rope with a lot of these things, you go, okay, yeah, okay, that's another outlet for clients.
You mentioned at the beginning your route into journalism from the grassroots level, as it were, at the
Yeah.
South London Press. And I think for our generations, doing those hard yards on local papers and agencies and such like was the training ground before we worked for nationals.
Mm.
These days, you're seeing a lot of young people being thrust into the world of journalism without that background and without that training, and a lot of them, I've heard a lot of anecdotes, even recently, of young journalists who aren't really expected to ever leave the office. They're supposed to be doing their reports or press
Yeah.
conferences and everything remotely, which makes it more difficult for that level of trust and um, relationship building to emerge in quite the same way. Have you found that that has made it more difficult as, dare I say it, the old guard start to move on?
Yeah, I think there's a frustration there, Dave, to be fair. On the, when you have WhatsApp, you have a little message, if it's sometimes it's just, hi, I'm on WhatsApp. I've put on always happy to talk. I would much prefer a conversation
Mm.
rather than a WhatsApp back and forth. And if if I'm meeting somebody new, and it happened quite recently, a young reporter with one of the clubs that I work with has been appointed, and too often the first message has been via WhatsApp. Hi, I'm so and so and so. I'm working on this, blah, blah. And I've said, I've said, okay, yeah, let's meet and have a coffee. Oh, well, I'm not sure I have time about that. This young reporter works for one of the nationals. Really seems like a really good guy initially. Sent me a message and said, I'm working with X. Um, I'd really like to take you for a coffee just to chat and pick your brain. I thought, oh, that's really, really refreshing because whatever the demands, whatever the demands of the sausage factory that journalism has become, via the online demands, and they are massive. And I'm glad I'm not a young reporter starting out now. Should always be the time for half an hour over a cup of coffee to talk and actually look into somebody's eyes rather than just on a screen where you've got no idea, where nuance is completely lost, where irony can be lost, where humor completely bypasses everybody. So, and even if you don't meet for a coffee, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and talk. That's what it's there. We're in the communications industry, whether you're on our side of the fence or the journalist side of the fence. We're in the communications industry. I think the challenge is that there are so many channels of opportunity to make contact via WhatsApp, via DMs, via email, that people forget that sometimes the best is just to have a conversation. It drives me mad. My kids, grown up kids now, um, message them. Oh, I'll give you a call. Oh no, I haven't got time to talk. But you've got time to sit and bounce messages back and forth for 10, 15 minutes. Why don't we just pick the phone up and have a chat?
Yeah.
I remember, and listen, it was my daughter, and my wife was when she was living at home, and my wife and I were sitting in the front room, and my wife's phone kept buzzing, and she would look at it and go, yeah, buzz, 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 buzz. I said, who the hell are you talking to? She went, oh, Sophie, my daughter. I said, what do you mean? She's upstairs. I said, I went mad. I went mad. I said, what are you doing? If you want to talk to your mum, come downstairs and have a chat. Oh, I'm busy. I said, we're not too busy to. Anyway, I don't want to diss my daughter because she's wonderful and I love her dearly. But that's kind of symptomatic of a generational thing. And I sound like an old fart, but I still believe that the truest tenets remain in place. That we are in the communications industry, so let's talk to each other. It's very easy, and I'm sure young people will be absolutely dismissive of, well, that's the way that we operate these days. I understand, and 99% of the time, oh, that's absolutely fine. But that 1%, when you want something, you need something, you're trying to find some information, a telephone call or a face-to-face meeting, not always possible, but a telephone call, for me, goes a thousand miles more than a WhatsApp exchange.
There's something
And I
strikes
do
me.
sound like an old fart, and I'm really sorry.
Something that strikes me there, Paul, is socialization, social skills.
Yeah.
Something for me that's very different in sport from other sectors in the corporate world is the degree of socialization. You
Mm.
talked about being a journalist and having contacts in all sorts of places. One of the things in sport is people meet so many people in so many environments.
Yeah.
When you're on the consultant side, it's much harder to manage a story. You used to use those contacts to get stories.
Yeah.
How do you manage that so many people know exactly what's going on when you're managing a story?
Um, I'm a great believer in a very tight circle of trust. So when you know that something is going to break. David, you mentioned crisis comms, and this is probably when it's most key. A very tight circle of trust within the organization who are looking to control the message. Okay. The wider it is, the more spin it gets, the more propensity there is for people to chat. And I don't mean they're being vindictive. I don't mean they're breaking any rules, but people talk. People talk to their wives, they talk to their children, they talk to their mum, they talk to their dad, they talk to their friends in the pub or whatever. The more people who know within that organization, the less chance you have of controlling it. So a very tight circle of trust initially. And I'm also a great believer in one singer, one song. If you're trying to control a narrative or provide damage limitation, then one focal point is essential. The more people who are talking and doing their very best and they think they're trying to protect the organization, the more splintered the message becomes. You have to identify what your message is, where you want it to go, and how you want it to get it there. If other people are going, yeah, but yeah, but I can do that. You have to close that down. You have to go, listen, we are in an industry where in sport, in football in particular, but certainly sport, as you say, Chris, there are so many people who know each other. So it's not like at boardroom level in business or where it's, you'll perhaps only talk to one person in an organization. I think what happens is you have to be really strong, especially if you're an outside consultant, and this is where you earn your coin. You go, let me be the lightning rod. Let me be the messenger. Sometimes it gives the organization plausible deniability, which is always handy. But also your expertise is messaging and identification of where that message should go to. Other people mean well, but you have to say, listen, let me deal with it. And that's a tight circle of trust and a single voice in terms of controlling the narrative or hoping to control the narrative or at least diluting potential damage. I think that's absolutely essential. And you have to have a bit of ego about yourself, I think, Chris. I think you have to say, okay, listen, this is what you're paying me for. Let me get on with it.
Having been on the other side of the coin, digging out stories and now working for organizations where you've got to make sure there is that small circle of trust. Has anything surprised you about the way that stories and crises evolve in a way that perhaps as a journalist you hadn't imagined?
No, not really. I think it's an age old story. I think journalists are trained to dig out information, positive, negative, whatever. No, nothing's really surprised me, David. I think that the only thing that's changed is the speed now at which a story hits because of social media, because of the digitalization of the mainstream media. There's no breathing space. There's no, okay, well, we can control this because it's not going to come out online until 10:30. Now it's the very best media organizations have completely disregarded, and rightly so, embargoes and gentlemen's agreements. And if a story is there, it's like, you know, we've got this ability to get that story out in literally a matter of seconds. Why would we choose to delay it? Because it's the accepted, well, that's what we always did. So I think the one thing that when you're looking to combat negativity is you have to move as swiftly as the news organizations or the online or Twitter or wherever it's breaking. You have to move as swiftly. There's not the breathing space that you used to get even 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, like it was where print was still the overriding dominating factor. And we're talking about the mainstream media now, which is that's where all the biggest stories are still broken.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the platform, it's the mainstream media organizations that are breaking the biggest stories. I'm thinking of like David Ornstein at The Athletic, or people like that. It's still mainstream. It's still mainstream media. So, as I was saying, 5 years ago, when print was still the dominant factor, it was okay. Well, the story's going out in the newspaper the next morning. We'll break it online at 10:30. So the first online editions would be refreshed at 10:30, and you knew, say the story had broken in the morning, or say in the early afternoon, you probably had 6 or 7 hours to get all your ducks in a line. Now, no, there's none of that. So you have to be extremely agile, because if you're working with a journalist, or whoever it may be, from a news organization, it's incumbent upon them to give you the right of reply. But you can't wait hours and hours and hours to give them that right of reply. You've got to move as swiftly as they are, because they are going to say, well, we gave you an hour. You didn't come back to us. We're going to go, and at the bottom of the line, at the bottom, it will be so and so was offered the right of reply, or we contacted representatives of, and that's just as damaging as because it looks like you're floundering. It looks like you haven't got the answers. So I'm a huge advocate of never saying no comment, never allowing anybody to say they refuse to comment.
Absolutely with you on that. I used to hate if anyone in any of my teams ended up with that.
Yeah.
But one of the problems, and it's interesting when you talk about evolution. I remember a particular time where, I won't name the story or the publication, but they were moving to digital first as a main newspaper. And it didn't have the same level of checks against that story that they would have done if it gone into print. And they rushed to print, and something was wrong in it.
Right.
And they were saying, actually, it's fine, we can correct it afterwards. Now,
Yeah.
one of my roles along the way was working for Sky News. And
Yeah.
in the early days, people used to say never wrong for long.
Yeah.
And it was but now there is a way in which actually harmful or wrong information can get out. You could
Yeah.
spend an awful lot of time playing whack-a-mole and
Yeah.
trying to stop. So how do you deal with that tricky balance?
I do think there is. I do despair a little bit of the mentality of the churn, which says, which feels to me like people would rather be wrong but first than right but second. And I think that's a massive cultural change. It's like, we'll get it out, and if it's wrong, okay, we'll change up in half an hour, or whatever. Which is like, yeah, but you were wrong initially. Where are you building the trust? Where do readers, or people who digest your information, how do they build up a level of trust if you're wrong so often, but you've broken it, or you believe being first on social media is the most important thing? Again, I think it comes down to your ability to have your voice heard, Chris. I think you have to be pretty forthright and go, okay, if you're going to you play by a certain accepted set of rules. If you're going to happily break those rules, if you're the journalist, or whatever, the news organization, if you're going to play fast and loose with those rules, then I reserve the right to go somewhere. And you've seen it countless times with you come out on your own channels and go, we said this news organization, and it's almost like you're trying to, you called it whack-a-mole. I think, yes, there's an element of that, but sometimes you've just got to be forthright and go, right, they came to us and they said this, and you tell the story behind the story, and almost that's more of an embarrassment factor for the news organization, who look like they've been a bit slipshod, or they've played fast and loose with journalistic ethics. And I think you shouldn't be scared of calling out people for a lack of journalistic ethics. Listen, as I say, much better, I believe, to be right and second or third, but to be absolutely right than wrong first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and again, experience comes into that. I think younger PR consultants and people within press offices or whatever media departments are sometimes a bit wary. Oh yeah, but they could do this, they could do that. Okay, let them have their best shot. The beauty of having your own, being your own media, having your own channels, is you've always got a proper channel for a right to reply.
Um, given the world of sport is so uh, prone to crisis because you've got so many varying factors
Second
from
only to government, I would say.
second to government, yeah. Um, have you found with the organisations that you've worked with, um, do they bring you in because they want you to ensure that they are damage limiting or protecting their reputations if something is going to arise?
Yeah,
And if
certainly. Yeah, certainly. There's an absolute element of that. I think quite a few years ago people would specialize in crisis comms. I don't think you can specialize in crisis comms anymore because you know you're hopefully getting paid. Well, people will look and go, well, we haven't had a crisis for 5 years. Now they may
Mm.
not have had, and you haven't had. You've got to be able to be better and bigger than just a crisis comms person. You've got to be a strategist. You've got to be able to advise in terms of, if you are given the opportunity, where media plays into marketing, where media plays into commercial, where media plays in across all elements, all sectors of that football club or that business or that brand. Crisis comms is just one strand. It's the one that gets the heart pumping. It's the closest I've found to working against a deadline in journalism. That's the closest that I've found where you go, right, I'm absolutely have to be on my toes. I have to be working whatever hours to fight this, to counter this, to dilute this, to push this line, to try and get a voice heard. That's the only I think that's the only adrenaline rush that I've ever got in the PR side of things. Whereas I used to get an adrenaline rush every time you had to write a match report against, deadline, or as a sports editor, where you had to get an edition out against deadline. That's an adrenaline rush, and that used to happen on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis at the least. I don't get that now, perhaps once or twice a year. So therefore, you can't live for that. You can't think, well, I'm just a crisis comm specialist, because I think that you have to have so many more strings to your bow, and you have to be able to link into marketing departments and commercial departments and the football department if it's in a football club. You can't go, well, no, I only solve problems.
It's I was asked at a conference, I think, last year about how to operate at pace at times of crisis.
Yeah,
And the answer was actually to do with preparation.
yeah,
And actually, a lot of crises are not crises, they're issues.
yeah,
And your job is to minimize the issue or to be aware of it before it comes.
yeah,
When there is an issue, how do you come out of that with opportunity increased, even if it's better trust with the people you've had to keep in touch with?
yeah,
So I love the way you talk about crisis in the ecosystem of the environment you're in, not just as a standalone.
yeah. And also what you've got to do is, the very best organizations that I've worked with, and and several of them I've been sort of part and parcel of building this. You have a overarching strategic policy document, and it is a document, and it's not just floating around somewhere. It's actually hard and fast. Everybody has a copy of it. Everybody should have a printed copy of it, should have it on their laptop, wherever, on their phones, wherever. And if it's this is what we do. If it's this is what we do. And okay, there is always going to be a blurring of the edges and something like that. But you have a strategy, and it's okay. So who's involved? If it's an issue, as you say, Chris, or a crisis, concerning an element of the football club, who is the voice, right? And what do we do? And you can't do that flying by the seat of your pants. There has to be a structure in place, an absolutely hard and fast policy of how you deal with it. Now, within that, there's going to be different issues, different problems, different crises, but they all play to the same set of ground rules, and it comes down to tight circle of trust, one singer, one song, and okay, what do we get out of this? Where do you want to in a crisis? It's where do you want to end up? So what's our best case scenario out of this? Sometimes it is, Jesus, it's tin out on and we just ride it out. And sometimes you just have to ride things out. But in other times, in other situations, other issues, it's, okay, we're going to take a kick in for a couple of days, 48 hours, the news agenda moves on. How then are we better for it? What do we put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again? And if that's an internal discussion where people can say, right, what lessons have we learned? Well, we've learned X, Y, and Z. We're going to make sure A, B, and C never happen again. That is progressive, and that's a positive. Now, the world outside that organisation might not see it, probably won't see it, but if the organisation internally sees how we've coped with it, we cope with it in a positive way, that's fine. Sometimes you just have to live with a kicking because you've done something wrong. And it comes back always, Chris, and we've spoken about this, and it's absolutely the hard and fast rule, and you can look back through the biggest stories in history. It's not what you've done wrong, it's how you've tried to cover it up.
It's interesting you use the phrase organization internally. I mean, two things. One is, I think, again, particularly in sport, how often internal can be quite stretched. Partners are very close. A lot of things are subcontracted.
Yeah.
So it's not just who's on the payroll.
Yeah.
But actually from that, when there is an issue, how important the internal culture is to that. One thing you say is sometimes we know this is going to hurt for a couple of days.
Yeah.
In my Sky days, there were people there who were very good at knowing what was going to have a long tail, what was just noisy in the moment.
Yeah.
The importance of people to come to you early on and say, this is what's happening. That sort of internal whistleblowing approach. Yeah. So the internal culture is a really good sign of whether you're storing up issues and whether you'll get through issues.
No, 100%. 100%. The best places I've ever worked is, and they're in all sectors, be it newspapers, be it media organisations, be it football clubs, be it brands, is that where people aren't scared, where there's no culture of fear, is no shit. If I make a mistake, my ass is going to be on the line. Better that nobody finds out. Much better to actually go, do you know what? I've screwed up here. I'm accountability, but I'm coming to you because you should know you might be able to help me. How do you help me? That's very, very simple, and it sounds very utopian, but the best organizations have that in place because we're dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with, okay, we are going to be dealing with AI progressively as we go on, but we're still dealing with human beings who are fallible, who make mistakes through no fault of their own sometimes, who don't do these things deliberately. And it's okay, right, you've made a mistake. How do we rectify that mistake? Now, it may never get outside of that organization. But what you go is, all right, this had the propensity to be really, really damaging. How do we make sure that doesn't happen again? And it's very easy to say, "Oh, don't live in a culture of fear," because we're in an economy and we're in a world where people fear that they are disposable, and I understand that entirely, and I'm certainly not immune to that at all. But the bottom line is, much rather own up, solve it, move on. Again, it sounds like fluffy cloudland, but that is absolutely the gold standard of an organization is that if mistakes are made and rectified and everybody moves on positively. Poor organizations, mistakes are made, they're not rectified, the culture shifts down another level and it keeps going down. And when it hits rock bottom, that's when you've got serious issues. Nothing. Listen, the News of the World was I know it's 15 years ago, but I've been watching a program on Netflix called The Dynasty about the Murdochs, which is quite fascinating. Having spent a very small period of time having an insight into the Murdoch way of operating. The whole thing was mistake made, scapegoats found, cover up. More mistakes made, more scapegoats found, bigger cover up, bigger cover up, bigger cover until you're basically a newspaper closes in the space of 48 hours. You know, one of the biggest selling English language newspaper in the world closed within 48 hours because there was such a poor culture dating back many years, such a poor culture that it was, and they should know because the News of the World made its reputation on uncovering that kind of scandal, and it didn't learn, and it ended up with 350 odd people losing their jobs in the space of 48 hours.
Yeah. You mentioned a moment ago AI, and I think technology has had such a tremendous impact on the world of communication, especially given the way the internet has affected the mainstream media and the resources that they're able to invest, given the changes to advertising. Do you where do you see the world of communication going, given there is an increasing focus on AI and data and analytics? How do you think that will evolve over the next few years based on what you're seeing with your
I think AI has absolutely a really positive role to play. I think it can take. I think it frees up people. You know, the drudgery of the very mundane jobs that you have to do, which you can utilize AI properly. It's when you lose the degree of humanity that you need in communication. Talked about just speaking on the phone. Talked about speaking person to person, not relying purely on, WhatsApp or email or anything like that. Relying purely on a machine to deliver something that needed a touch of humanity is a massive mistake. Sometimes you just have to put in the hard yards on your own and do it rather than pressing a button and putting in a set of key messaging that you want AI to create something for you. So listen, I'm 59 years old. Is AI going to have a massive impact on my life? I don't think so. Hopefully I'll be over the hill and far away before it's playing too much of a role. But the bottom line is communicate person to person, human to human. Sometimes the easy way is not the right way. Sometimes actually putting in an hour or 2 hours work on a document, on a proposal, or on something is worth its weight in gold because it feels like you're sending a message to another human being. It sounds very flimsy, doesn't it? And I even as I'm saying it, it sounds flimsy. But I can't get away from the fact that humans communicate better with each other than machines do with each other.
Yeah.
God, I sound old. I sound old. Oh, AI's crap. WhatsApp's crap. Email's crap. Bring back 2 tin cans and a string. We should be fine.
Actually, I think I often say to people, the thing about AI is if you understand what to input and you know how to judge the output,
Yeah.
it makes things easier in the middle. A
Yeah.
lot of the conversation we've had here is is actually being about the brilliant basics, the core
Yeah,
basics.
yeah,
And then how there was a great quote from it was a guy from Google AI on Radio 4 the other day talking about AI as assistance, not authorship.
yeah.
And I think when you talk through the brilliant
Somebody should have
basics,
told Matt Godwin that.
Yeah.
maybe. But what strikes me, my sort of final question is about measurement. I think especially in the world of sport, and maybe especially in football, where
Yeah,
it's easy to measure money and medals,
yeah.
and it's really hard to measure reputation, the flow
Mm,
of influence, intelligence, insight.
mm,
And long term, you talk about where do we want to be, it can often be long term, not short term.
mm.
How do you either convince yourself or show your clients or whatever that it's job done? How do you measure?
I don't think you can ever say job done, Chris. I think there's always things that you can improve. I think you get to a certain standard. One client that I've worked with for about 11, almost 12 years now, it's like we started off at a level and they went, okay, we're really, really happy with that. That's excellent. Could have kept on that same path, doing the same things. Uh, there was no criticism, there was no problems, there was no issues, there was no crises. It was all very, very positive. But they came to me and said, okay, well, we've done that for 2 years. How do we improve? Not what we're doing is bad, but we need to be better.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And that's the challenge. When everything's going what you think is swimmingly, how do you improve that? And that's a challenge. I think it's a lovely, positive challenge to have. Um, and then you have to be really smart and go, okay, so that's when you come back to where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? Where are you setting your sights? If we're going to change this, there must have been somebody saying, well, we're setting our sights a little bit higher. Okay, great. Um, that's fine. If I know what those sights are, those ambitions, targets are, then you build something internally in a communications policy and strategy document, which says, okay, we did this really well, but we're trying to get here. This is what we need to do to be better. And as I say, over 11, 12 years, I think it's changed 4 or 5 times. Every couple of years, the challenge has been right. Okay, so, well, we've done that. We want to reach out now. Our messaging has to be in this field. We've put that to bed. We've got that. We're very comfortable with that. We can keep on doing that. But the challenge is it's now international. So where are your best international outlets? Okay, it's here, it's there, it's and your level of expertise and insight in the industry suggests to them, well, what about moving in this direction? They go, great. And then you plateau, but the best organizations should hate to plateau. The best organization should be, we are doing everything really, really well. But how can we be a little bit better?
Yeah.
And those are the organizations that I love working with. And I've been very, very fortunate. I've got a core base of clients. This is nothing to do with me. It's to do with the leadership within those organizations, which keeps saying we are good. We want to be better. How do we become better? And those are dream clients. Those clients with where you understand, where you have a longevity of relationship, where you understand what their culture is. You've had a small impact in building that culture, but they turn to you to say, our culture needs to evolve. Our targets need to be higher. We need to be better. How do we do that? Those are the those are the dream jobs. Those are the jobs that make not being the sports editor of the News of the World worthwhile.
What a brilliant place to leave it. Thank you so much, Paul,
I
for
was
your
always better on
time.
my payoffs than my intros, Dave.
Thank you so much. We'll send this to you on WhatsApp when it's finished. I'm joking. Thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant. We've learned a lot, I'm sure, and the audience will get so many fantastic insights from your experience and knowledge. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to CIPR Sports Network today.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Lovely to see you both.
Thank you.